These unconventional times require unconventional conversations. Listen in as your host, Richard Gordon, engages in one-on-one conversations with numerous leaders, elected officials, politicians, and others to learn what's happening in your state, on the Hill, and across America. Now, here's the host of Unconventional Times, Richard Gordon.
This is Richard Gordon from Unconventional Times. I hope you watched the first episode with Jonathan Weiner, where we talked about a whole bunch of foreign policy issues like Libya and the war in Iran and other issues. And now I hope you'll join us for the second part, where we talked about a lot of things dealing with the United States foreign policy, the New World Order, what's going on in Cuba, and where the country is going on so many different foreign policy issues. And is there actually a foreign policy point of view that the administration is trying to put forward? So join us. Jonathan's a great guest. It was very interesting. I enjoyed it. I hope you will too. So join us for part two. Let's switch to Iran. As I said, it's day 81. It reminds me of the old song, War, What Is It Good For? Right? Americans are curious, like, what is this war about? I mean, I was looking at numbers recently, and no one supports it. I mean, it is heavily unpopular. But people just want a basic answer. Why are we at war with Iran? What's the objective? And is the objective even accomplishable?
We're at war with Iran because of Greenland.
I'm sorry, we're at war with Iran because of Greenland. You're going to have to explain. Okay,
yes,
go with that one.
That was provocative.
Yeah, I want to know what that means.
Greenland, Venezuela, Russia, Ukraine, Iraq, Syria, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Libya. What do they all have in common? They all had natural resources in common.
Right.
And Mr. Trump is interested in acquiring as much power over natural resources in many jurisdictions as he can. And after the Venezuela conflict, which seemed to be over almost as soon as it started, once the Venezuelan narco-terrorists agreed to share some of their natural resources with the Trump administration, with the removal of their leader, but everybody else, all the other people we indicted as narco-terrorists, still in place, other than the fishermen the United States killed. They're all still there, all of them. A bunch of people we indicted. So once he saw that was easy. It didn't even last a week. I'm going to do the same thing in Iran. Bibi Netanyahu tells me they're all going to throw down their arms and come out in the streets and overthrow the regime. And the United States will get a share of Iranian oil, and that'll be a coup. It'll be demonstrate U.S. power once again. It'll be inexpensive and quick, and we'll get rid of the nukes at the same time and demonstrate that Obama and Biden were terrible presidents and that Trump was a better president. So a mixture of natural resources as strategy, a foreign government's leader charismatically pressing a case that was not true with the president and getting him to believe it regardless of what the U.S. intelligence agencies told him and others, and the president's personal psychology. Those are the three elements. And Greenland helps you understand the Iran play. It was based on faulty premises, faulty assessments, faulty decisions. And that's why he would say, inside of a single day, they were going to strike us for sure within a week. It was necessary to defend us against an imminent attack. Not true.
Right.
Definitively not true. Definitively not true. Oh, we were going to get energy. He said that, their oil. Oh, we're going to do regime change. Oh, we didn't want regime change, but we were going to get regime change. I was going to get eradicate their nukes, which I previously declared I'd eradicated. So the constant shift is, because what he actually thought was, it would all be over really quickly, and the United States would have access to Iranian oil just as it had access to Venezuelan oil.
Okay, so much here. Let's just start with this. You've been in the room when it happened, okay? So you've been in the room when people are advising Secretary of State, whatever, at the highest levels. You have been in the room when it happens.
I've been in cabinet meetings and NSC meetings, yes.
What you're saying now is that there are people in the government who are basically telling the President of the United States wrong information. I'm not, I didn't,
No.
Okay.
To the contrary. There were people in the United States government telling the president the right information as they testified before Congress, and he discounted it and told them to go do it anyway. What he wanted from the military was not broad geopolitical assessments of what was going to happen. He wanted to know, can you kill the leadership? Can you decapitate them like we did in Venezuela? Can you further injure their nuclear capacity? Can you wipe out their air force? And he got yes, yes, and we can do a great deal of harm to their air force. And those assessments were correct. He got accurate tactical information, and he got strategic advice assessments based on the testimony, which he rejected in favor of the Netanyahu strategic advice. So no, the U.S. government internally did the right thing, as near as I can tell, in the information provided. But you can't, it's not good enough to have brilliant tactics. We had brilliant tactics from time to time in Vietnam, a huge amount. Some of the tactics weren't smart, but it's very effective if you look at individual operations and the kill count. But the kill count bore no relationship whatsoever to any strategic reality. It didn't matter how many Vietnamese you killed; they were going to stay with it, and they did, and they outlasted us. So there was the wrong strategy. The strategic element was fundamentally flawed in Vietnam. The strategic element on Iran was fundamentally mistaken.
Well, he clearly thought that this would be over quickly. And you feel that comes straight from Prime Minister Netanyahu.
And Venezuela. I just did it. I just proved it. You decapitate them, the ones who remain.
Venezuela is not Iran. I mean, Iran is a massive country with massive resources.
They both produce a bunch of oil, and they're both third world countries, and they're not the United States, and we can just
knock it out.
Bibi's been incredibly successful in getting rid of their nuclear scientists, attacks in Tehran, and so on and so forth. You're telling me to ignore the guy who's been living with us every day for decades and has had success after success after success and just wiped out Hezbollah in an amazing intelligence operation? You're telling me to be a weak and a coward? I'm not doing that. I'm going to win. MAGA's going to win. I wasn't in the room. This is an imagined conversation, but the shards of information that we have about what happened is consistent with what I've just said.
So what have we accomplished? Let's look at this. 81 days have passed by. A number of American kids died in the conflict. What have we accomplished?
We have assassinated the leadership, the clerical leadership of Iran, who were viciously anti-American.
Right.
We also killed the prime negotiators that we did the nuclear deal with, which was better than any deal that's been gotten since there's been no deal. So we'll get back to that. We put further pressure on the nuclear program by creating further attacks on its infrastructure. Don't know how much, impossible to assess from the outside, but certainly some. Those were our major accomplishments. We gave.
But has it been?
We gave Iran proof that it doesn't need nuclear weapons. Huh? Why did I just say that? We gave Iran proof it doesn't need nuclear weapons because we revealed something that had never been tested before, which is the use of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz as a strategic, tactical, economic nuke. You don't have no radioactivity, no physical damage, but the ability to inflict massive harm on a global basis.
Well, we had to have known. I mean, look, you look at a map, you had to have known that that is a possibility, that they could do that.
It never happened before.
Well, they've never been put in this situation before either.
Right. So a friend of mine was at the Council on Foreign Relations, and I were talking about this a few weeks into the war, and we both agreed that we now could convince Iran to give up its nuclear program as long as it could close the strait at any time.
Right. Right.
If it wasn't happy with the way the United States was treating it. That would be a much smarter approach for the Iranians. But we decided not to write about it. We thought it would be too flip.
Is there any way we get their nuclear fuel out of there? I mean, I don't understand how you do it without an on-the-ground invasion.
Oh, in theory, you could get their nuclear fuel out with a few conditions. Let's talk about the conditions, and then we're going to go from the theory to the reality. Condition one, sanctions have to be lifted. Iran has to be free to sell its oil to China and have economic opportunity for Iran again and no sanctions. Huge economic benefits, all of its frozen funds released, and massive amounts of money. That's the first thing. But that was easy. That you could do. You might not, if you're getting all the nuclear stuff out, hard to know how you would know.
Right, of course.
How do you know it's all? You got all of it. But let's pretend.
Okay. I mean, we
Okay,
have estimates
next-
of how much there is.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go to the second. Let's go to the second part. You would have to get Israel to commit in a way that you could guarantee, not just a guarantee, but a guaranteed guarantee, a guaranteed that Israel is not going to attack Iran again. Now, is Benjamin Netanyahu going to agree never to attack Iran again, no matter how much political problems he may have at home, and no matter what else Iran may be doing, even if it gives up nukes? Can you get him to agree to that? Based on everything that I have seen, the answer is it's not in the interest of his own political survival.
He's been wanting to do this for 20 years. So no, he would never do that.
He would never do that. He can't do it because his coalition, his
Right.
base requires him to be 100% anti-Iran and to stay with it till the clerical regime is gone. And he's got corruption charges that have been deferred by first October 7th and now by this war.
Exactly.
And so he gets depositioned as soon as the war is over. So once you realize that they have to do both of those things, you say there's no deal, there's no solution here without a deal with Iran. And there is no deal with Iran that's plausible, that addresses the nuclear issue. So what deal is plausible? The answer is a deal that's plausible on Iran that would end the war for the time being, and over the next 9 months to a year, begin to bring oil prices down some because of what happened in Qatar and the destruction of oil capacities there, and because
Right.
of the loss of the last few months. The deal is to have China or the Saudis, Emiratis, and Qataris negotiate an arrangement with Iran in which the U.S. agrees it's not going to bother any Iranian vessels or any vessels carrying Iranian stuff so long as Iran allows everybody else's vessels through. So it's very narrow. It's Strait of Hormuz only, nothing else, and it addresses Iran's economic interests. Now, politically, that's quite hard for Mr. Trump, but he could have it be an arrangement rather than an agreement. And it's kind of like the China-U.S. deal on critical minerals and chips. It's not a negotiated agreement. It's an arrangement because it's a necessity on both sides. So this conflict ends with the necessities on both sides being met. And that would be the smallest deal you could do, or arrangement. And the U.S. wouldn't even have to negotiate. It would just have to, the second that it starts stopping Iranian ships, boom, strait's closed again.
Right. Well, look, a ship got shot at the other day by Iran. I mean, a ship was trying to run the blockade
Yeah.
and got shot at. So, look, you brought up the Strait of Hormuz a number of times. I read your article about fertilizer and the Strait. Prices in America are going up dramatically. I mean, prices of food are going to go up because the price of fertilizer is going up. The price of gas is going way up. Now I hear that there's a shortage of motor oil for our cars because no one wants to produce it because they have to produce jet fuel and gasoline.
The airlines are running out of fuel. According to Delta, which owns some of its own fuel production capacity. It's the one airline that's got literally ownership of energy. Says people are going to be raising prices another 20 to 30% for ordinary tourist coach class stuff by the fall, and Americans are not going to like it, but the airline's going to have no choice.
Right. How do we deal with that? I guess the only way is what you just suggested about how to open the strait.
Yeah, we just gave Iran the gift of finding a way out of sanctions and finding a way to be able to have its economy recover through sales to China or whomever. Because until we do that, I don't see, find it very likely that Iran is going to allow the strait to open. And this is reflected in Mr. Trump's language, which is like, okay, let's see if I threaten to destroy their entire civilization again, immediately, tomorrow. That will unlock something. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, I'm going to postpone it again. Let me compliment them and say how brilliant they are and what wonderful negotiators they are and what friends we can be. Let's see if that unlocks it. Oh, that didn't work. Well, let me go threaten them again. Well, that didn't work. Let me change the topic. So he doesn't have a solution, a tactical solution, because he didn't have a strategic framework for initiating the war in the first place. And it turns out that Iran has discovered something that changes the entire correlation of forces, where the United States does not have the unilateral ability to end the war. Mr. Trump could say, I'm not doing continuous war, the war's over, I'm leaving.
Right.
You guys in the region, in Europe, you figure out the Strait of Hormuz. He also said that was what he was going to do several times. The problem with that strategy, that approach, it might buy him a few days, but the problem is that the global price of energy is affected by the Strait of Hormuz, even if most of the energy from the Strait doesn't go to the United States.
We would completely lose control if you do that.
It wouldn't reduce the price of oil. It would not reduce the price of oil. So in the meantime, what we have is announcements at various times which seem to affect financial markets and energy markets. We then have Polymarket and the other company that does events betting. People making huge amounts of money on the swings.
Right.
On the swings. And that seems to be right now the policy. Now, I am not saying that the president or those around him are engaged in market manipulation or insider trading. I'm not making that accusation. What I am saying is the evidence suggests that somebody is.
Well, clearly people are making a lot of money off. I mean,
no, they're making money
futures
off.
market.
They're making money knowing, not just futures, but prediction markets, knowing about announcements. The pattern of trades shows people trading just ahead of announcements.
Yeah.
So
And it looks like they're investigating that because there are people who are doing that. Let me ask you two quick questions on Iran. I really want to keep moving. Does this help Libya selling their oil?
Yes, it does help Libya.
I would think it would because
it's very good for Libya and Algeria, which also produces a lot of oil, and any number of other energy-producing countries. It's very good for Morocco potentially because of Moroccan phosphates.
Right.
Fertilizer. So over the next years, there'll be further supply chain diversification out of the Gulf to countries that are not limited by the Gulf,
Right.
which will help with commodity prices globally. But it takes a few years, as we saw with the COVID whiplash.
My other question, my last question, this is, the president, when he announced this, said there would be a popular uprising and the people of Iran would take over.
He did say Iran.
He did say Iran, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I'm just thinking popular uprising. What country?
Well, no, and that's really where I want to go with you because you and I just had a discussion about a popular uprising in Iran that didn't work. They moved to Iraq.
Yeah.
We didn't really see it in Iraq. We know what happened in Afghanistan. You just talked about Libya. Popular uprisings definitely don't work when one side has guns and the people with the popular uprising don't. So what type of popular uprising can there be?
Well,
and who would replace them? That's the other thing. Like when you were talking about the Iranians who moved to Ukraine, they could have been a new government, I guess. Who could be a new government here? It just seems like different people.
It probably would not be the Mujahideen Khalq. They're not real popular in Iran, as near as I can tell. I think Syria is the better model. Syria, there was an uprising against Assad. It took years and years and years and repeated waves of it in various ways. The people who took over used to be part of, and we talked about terrorist labels earlier in our conversation, Al-Qaeda or Islamic State, and now they're the recognized leaders. They were part of al-Nusra, which was an aligned organization.
Yeah.
So now they're the leaders recognized by the United States and Syria. So they were really interested in replacing the terrible government that Assad represented and who used chemical weapons against his own people. And that was a domestic uprising. That was not an uprising that was bought and paid for by a foreign government. So uprisings do happen, and even in democratic countries, you have uprisings, not just in autocracies. They happen from time to time, and sometimes they're successful.
Sure.
So the Venezuelans were not able to do an uprising. There's a lot of unrest. They fled. A third of the country
Right.
in the war has fled. The narco-terrorist regime that we're now working with beautifully. In the case of frustrated elections, you have color revolutions. So the current government in Ukraine evolved out of a color revolution, where they kicked out the people who were close to Putin. They lost the election, and when they insisted on staying in place and suppressing the actual winner, there was an uprising in the streets, and the Ukrainian government was not willing to do the mass slaughter that would have been essential to maintain control if they could have. And people associated with the old regime fled. So there are uprisings. One in Iran could have happened, in theory, but there weren't enough people yet willing to risk their lives against these very ruthless clerics who hold all the instruments of power and a monopoly over most of the critical businesses in the country. You know, they've got these boneyards, the Iranian foundations, which control sector after sector after sector in Iran. So it's a fascist is the wrong word, but it's a fascist business model, in that you have a political party, the clerics, and their business controlling all the businesses who are in alignment with them. And that is the economic model. So it would be hard, but Iran could have potentially gotten there if we had not done this at this time. When would they have gotten there? It could have been years.
Right.
And it's not predictable. Now the question is, with all of the energy increases, cost of energy in the West, and inflation, if there are frustrated elections to come in the United States or elsewhere, and efforts to suppress the actual results, will you see more uprisings like the color revolutions we've seen elsewhere? And that's, for me, is a great question right now.
Let me run through a couple other worldly situations very quickly, because I know we're a little pressed for time here. Here's a word people don't use much, and you said it, Ukraine. We don't hear anything about Ukraine these days. I mean, this war's dragged on for the longest time. Trump said he could end it in 24 hours. It's been many 24 hours. Putin said about a week ago that he could see an end to the war. I'm not exactly sure what that means. What's going on in Ukraine? How's it end?
Over a thousand years, Russia's war of conquests, from what started out as a tiny little place in what today is Ukraine, to something that traverses the Asian continent and starts in Europe, biggest country in the world geographically. They just keep going till somebody stops them. And what we've seen under Putin is a series of what we call frozen conflicts. So they take some territory. They took something called Transdniester, which is part of Moldova, which used to be part of the Soviet Union, which is next to Romania. And Moldova has the eastern section, Transdniester, had a lot of Russian speakers. And the Russian government came in with their military, and it's a frozen conflict. Moldova hasn't given it up. Moldova doesn't control it, and it's just sat there. It never got resolved. Georgia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia,
Right.
same thing, frozen conflicts. Crimea, same thing. The Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, same thing.
Right.
So
Donbass.
every analyst I know, I don't know all the analysts, but I know some,
Sure.
takes a similar perspective, and their perspective or point of view is this will end in a frozen conflict, not an agreement. The agreement could be a ceasefire with everything else to be negotiated in the future, but that's a frozen conflict.
And then Russian troops just stay there. So in the Crimea,
Yeah.
they just stay there.
That's right.
It's not part of Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't legally give it up,
No,
but doesn't do anything about it. It just stays there.
yeah. And that would stop the killing and stop the bombing and allow them to move forward.
And do you think Ukrainian government could agree to that?
They're not agreeing to anything other than ceasefire. All they're agreeing to is a ceasefire.
Which would serve their purpose.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's move to Europe and NATO. the president has been extraordinarily critical of some of our biggest allies in Europe. Um, uh, Starmer in the UK, Chancellor Merz in Germany. He called Merz names. He called Starmer no Churchill. What's going on here? Like, why is the American president attacking some of our greatest allies?
Well, first, Ukraine got him very upset when it wouldn't publicly announce it was going to criminally investigate Biden.
Right.
That was the call which led to his first impeachment. So he's been mad at Zelensky in Ukraine for quite a while now. That's nothing new. In terms of Europe, he doesn't like Brussels. He doesn't like multilateral institutions. And he's been critical of NATO since his first visit to Russia in the 80s, when he purchased, and we know Mr. Trump likes to purchase large ads in major newspapers at his own expense. And that's the kind of thing he does, is spend his own money on newspaper ads. Not so much, but he I don't know what the source of funds were, but I do know that he did ads, full-page ads in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, I think the Washington Post, essentially taking the position then of the Soviet Union that U.S. deployments in Europe were bad, and that NATO was potentially dangerous. So these positions have been positions he's had for a long time, going back to when he was first visiting Russia and learning the point of view of Russia. I think I should leave it at that, but this is not new from him. It's a long-standing point of view as reflected in these full-page newspaper ads of many decades ago.
Do we need NATO anymore?
Yes.
Okay. Because there's some people who say we don't.
Sure, if you feel comfortable that Mr. Putin has no designs on Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, that he's happy to see Kaliningrad, which used to be part of Germany, be a separate enclave inside those countries, separate from Russia, without continuity to the rest of Russia, doesn't want any adjustments there, that he's not going to take any more from Moldova, and he doesn't want to have Belarus or Kazakhstan reintegrated with Russia. And from there, going from there to potentially roll up other countries in Central Asia. And if you're willing to ignore the paper that he wrote and published in the summer of 2021, 7 months before invading Ukraine, in which he talked about the historic extent of the Russian of Russia, the eternal ties of Ukraine and Russia and their integration, and the importance of the rest of the territory around it.
Well, I think he'd like to put the Soviet Union back together if he could.
I think that's the point.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, last
he called it the Great Catastrophe.
Right,
And so he should go down in history as the person reversing the Great Catastrophe.
right. By putting the Soviet Union together.
Yeah, which don't forget, that includes the three Baltics, which are part of the EU
Right.
and NATO.
Exactly. Last country, Cuba. What does indicting Raul Castro do? I mean, what is the purpose of this? I mean, you put this in this whole framework of our larger global sphere and things we're trying to accomplish. But what does it accomplish for us, even if we took over Cuba? Is this just a political play for American Cubans? I mean, is that what this is about, or is there something bigger here?
Is the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor a Cuban American who grew up
Yes.
on how terrible the Castro regime was to the people that he knew, some of whom had wealth and property in Cuba that was confiscated by the communist Castro government, and their friends and relatives were executed by Fidel and Raul at the very beginning of the takeover. They executed a lot of political enemies at the very beginning in mass executions. They did that. That's a living memory for any number of Miami Cubans. Cuba survived on Venezuelan oil after Russia stopped being its main supplier. And so, and the country had its own diaspora with lots more Cubans going to the United States, and more would go if they could. Given all of that, this is like easy. You can just kind of touch them and they're going to fall down, is the idea.
Sure.
They don't have any energy and they don't have any power. The people are desperate for change. Now, the Cuban government has brought them education and health care, but there's no band-aids. There's no antiseptic ointment.
Right.
The teachers are paid next to nothing. The doctors are paid next to nothing. It's not working. This was a plantation economy under the United States planters in the 19th century. It was a plantation economy again in the 20th century in different ways until Castro took over. So there's a long history of a relationship that was unequal with the United States for Cubans. And they're at a point now where they would say, okay, ready to try it again if we adopted a different policy towards them. But instead, the Trump administration's approach, which I understand, is one where unconditional surrender, the same policy that they described to Iran, unconditional surrender. That's a hard one to do. The last people who did an unconditional surrender to the United States, to the best of my memory, was Germany.
I was going to go with Japan
and Japan.
Yeah,
those were
standing on the Missouri. Yeah.
Yeah, those were the last two.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Band-Aids and that stuff because I think when you were at the State Department the first time, I was given permission by the State Department to go to Cuba to deliver medical supplies. And a group of us flew down and brought medical supplies to a hospital, a local clinic.
I brought medical supplies in my one trip to Cuba to churches.
Yeah.
I couldn't trust a hospital or
I brought to it was an offshoot of a synagogue.
Yeah, so I did. Yeah, we went to various churches where we did it. That and soccer balls. We took a bunch of soccer balls, which we brought uninflated, inflated them, and handed them out to kids in the street, in addition to the medical supplies.
Castro asked me why I didn't invite him to come with us. I said I didn't think you'd come. I said if you invited me, maybe I would.
When my trip to Cuba, what I learned is how much the Cuban people wanted out
Yes.
of the whole situation. Wanted freedom,
Yeah.
and wanted not to be punished for things that they don't control.
It also seems like a country that if the people wanted to topple their government, they might be able to do it.
No, because the Communist Party put in place neighborhood watchers.
Oh, true.
They have a very effective system of repression.
Yeah.
And the question becomes now, is that breaking down given the economic breakdown? I don't know the answer.
There's such scarcity of everything. So, look, this whole conversation just leads me to, I have to ask you, I mean, you were in the State Department for a long time. You worked with a lot of people. What is the Trump foreign policy? It seems use a big stick and speak very loudly and beat up on people and take their natural resources. I mean, is that a summation?
Yes, we don't need allies. The only thing that matters is deals. And the deals come at the power, using our economic power and our military power. Tariffs are all about weapons that you deploy in order to get deals. So it's a very much very much a situation in which it's not a win. They're not looking for win-wins. They're simply looking to win, to take what they can. And it's not power politics is not a traditional approach to U.S. diplomacy, which has been very focused on trying to find win-wins and to create a net increase of the benefit to multiple parties, because you need to have relationships as new things develop and problems cross borders. You know, it's not just environmental issues that cross borders, like global warming, for example, and pollution. Everything crosses borders. So you need to have partners if you want to maintain your sovereignty. So if you think about maintaining sovereignty and American power, the way to do that is to have relations with other countries that can enhance your sovereignty on a global basis. But they're transactional, they're not relational.
If Donald Trump leaves office in 2.5 years, or whatever it is, having stopped Iran, gotten rid of a dictator in Venezuela, gotten rid of communism in Cuba, I think people will look at him as having been successful on that score, right? He's gotten rid of at least three horrible authoritarian governments. What's wrong with that argument?
Well, in Venezuela, he left all the other narco terrorists behind who were still in place.
Well, he pardoned one in I don't know, someplace in Honduras, I think.
Yeah, but the key people who maintain Venezuelan repression and the system that's caused a third of the population or more to leave are still in place, other than the president and his wife. So the story is not told on that yet. In blowing up the nuclear deal the first time he was president, tearing that up, he eliminated something which had a lot of control mechanisms in it, and which potentially could have been built upon further. So sure, you can do it, but it's not as simple as that story is, of course. In reality, we'll have to see what happens on Iran's nukes at this point. We don't know. We're going to have to see what happens on Venezuela. And right now, the communists are still in power in Cuba, and the country's in terrible shape. I hope that the policy succeeds in Cuba, that Cuba is opened up, but it's not the way that makes any sense to have gone about. You could have gotten a lot more opening up and freedom in Cuba without shutting down their economy. It was already in dire straits long before this. It was in dire straits under Biden.
Cuba was.
Yes.
Yeah. Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada said there's a new world order. Do you think there's a new world order? And if there is, who is it?
Yeah, there's a new world disorder. The ordering principles that every previous American president tried to build in various ways, with all kinds of mistakes along the way, whether you're talking about the Iraq War or the Vietnam War, for example, was one where the United States played a preeminent role, and where the United States helped build multilateral institutions which were stabilizers, and where the United States had lots of alliances which were stabilizers. And those stabilizers have been largely removed, not completely, but they've certainly been weakened. And so we have right now a great global disorder with a tremendous amount of uncertainty, higher inflation on a global basis, higher unemployment on a global basis, climate change continuing at a pace, and a lot of risk. And we have to manage it and try for greater predictability and stability in the days to come. I spent much of my career working on financial crime and corruption, to counter financial crime and corruption, because that weakens governments. And when you weaken governments in favor of the corrupt, you wind up undermining neutral principles which promote the sovereignty of governments across the world and their ability to meet the needs of their people. And I would say this administration is leaving behind a more corrupt world than the world that existed, a less stable world, a less safe world, a less predictable world, at a time when the world is faced by really significant problems due to poverty, migration, and a lot of changes from technology, north-south issues, income equality issues, which are not just within countries, but lead to these massive migrations. So when you talk about illegal immigration in the United States, huge problem. I'm actually a hardliner on immigration in a variety of ways, because there's an unlimited supply of people who'd like to live in the United States.
Sure.
Millions. So I'm
But isn't
not.
climate change going to make it worse?
Yes.
I mean, that's something
Yes.
people don't talk about.
A-
As the world gets
and
hotter, they're going to
fertilizer.
move to more moderate temperatures.
Yes, and fertilizer shortages make it worse, because then you get food insecurity. And inflation makes it worse, because then people can't afford to live where they are. And that in turn feeds terrorism and criminality. So it's not easy achieving middle class standards of living and civilized societies that are reasonably well governed. That is hard. And we're in worse shape in those areas today than we were a few years ago. We weren't in great shape then.
Let me ask you a question about the State Department. Not only are you an expert on international affairs, you are an expert about the State Department. There's a lot of discussion that the State Department is being eviscerated, that our career people around the world are being fired, let go, not kept, whatever, allowed to retire. People saying it may take a generation to get the State Department back to where it is. Is that hyperbole, or
No.
should we be concerned about our condition at the State Department?
If you care about alliances, if you think the United States is one country amongst 200, that the population of the United States is a minority out of the whole world. What's the whole world's population? 5 billion, maybe? Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Or maybe 350 million, something like that. I don't know what the current number is.
Right.
Might be 8% then. So that's 90+% who are not living in the United States. They produce many of the goods that we need, including raw materials that we need. So no country is an island unto itself. We're living on one planet. Some elements of our fate are common to one another. And you have to, that's reality. And this administration is not taking that into account. And so we're going to have greater instability, greater disorder, and more trouble as a result, and that's too bad. I wish it were otherwise. I hope that they will begin to adopt more sensible policies, operate with greater transparency and integrity, look before they leap, not rely on the gut instinct of just any one person, listen to one another, take advantage of expertise. Those things can help. We have incredible technical capabilities in the United States, an incredible common infrastructure, an enormous energy from a population with people who know how to do a whole lot of things. And we're not taking advantage of it very well right now.
I think you might have just answered my last question, which is you've been everywhere. You've seen a lot, you've talked to a lot of people, you've advised people at the absolute highest levels. What are you worried about? What are you worried about for the world? What are you worried about for the United States?
For the world, I'm worried about the creation of institutions for consultation and integration to align people's activities, to promote the well-being of people regardless of where they live. So the countries that don't participate in those kinds of arrangements become outliers and problems to be addressed rather than just independent actors who are destructive. The world needs to have that kind of integrated approach in which individual governments work from their interests to find common interests that meet the needs of each of the people in each country through common approaches where you can agree as much as you can to increase as much as possible the common good. And where you have differences and are in competition or adversaries, you have to respect those too and pay attention to those in order to avoid risk. That's the world I want to see. The world I see instead is a world that's becoming much more fragmented, countries acting on their own to achieve their immediate self-interest without adequate planning for the medium term and the long term. So the risk is that the short term is destructive to the medium term and the long term, and that we can't get things back together adequately with all the science and technology we have because of underlying resource changes and the constant pressures on politics. That's what I worry about for the planet. For the United States, I worry about whether our Constitution, 250 years in, is equal to the task of allowing us to govern ourselves and be governed, again, in the common good, in ways that bring the country together through finding common ways of lifting everybody up. Not because you're a white person, a black person, a brown person, a heterosexual person, a homosexual person, a person of any other sexual orientation. Not because you're a man or a woman, not because you're young or you're old, not because you were born here or you weren't, but because you are at this point an American. And we, as a country, we have common needs and goals, and we have to work together on them. And in that kind of a country, you can do anything. You can build almost anything. We have the skill set, we have the capital, we have the knowledge, we have the people. That's not the current vision. I see that both political parties as enmeshed in identity politics, saying this is a good person, this is a bad person. And once you're black and white in that way, and our Supreme Court has played a huge role in amplifying this problem and accelerating it, you wind up tearing yourself apart. So my biggest worry is that we're destined for a civil war in which the country comes apart in some way. I don't mean a literal recreation of the Battle of Appomattox or Bull Run. I don't mean necessarily people in the streets with guns, but essentially the hostility at all times between the two sides, leading to a lot of stress and suffering. And I would like to see how we could get past that. I'm not unusual in pointing to this as our big national problem, but it is at the core of it as far as I'm concerned.
Wow, we're going to leave it there. You used a very interesting word. You said destined, that we're destined for that. That's, I hope you're wrong.
I want to be wrong.
I know you do.
I said I fear.
You said destined. I'll have to go.
If we don't change,
We don't change.
it continues to get worse. And people.
The thing about you and I, the thing about the two of us, we are optimists, and so we will continue to hope that things are better. Listen, you've been extraordinarily generous with your time. This was a tour de force of the world. We got to learn about a ton of things. I really can't thank you enough. Jonathan Weiner, stay unconventional.
Yeah, Richard Gordon, stay unconventional. Keep it going. These are unconventional times.
These are. Hey, I'm going to finish by saying just a couple things in conclusion, if I may. Look, as we've just heard, American foreign policy has become increasingly more unstable and unpredictable. And there are flashpoints around the world, and none of them appear to be going away anytime soon. And it's important for us as a people, as a country, as a nation, to understand that we have a role to play, a major role to play. We always have, and that's what America has done. And we have to continue to play that role. And it's wrong for us to back away from it or argue that it isn't our position. And a lot of people are saying that now, but those people are wrong. And when we pull back, someone comes in, and we can't allow that. I'm going to turn, if I may, to something completely different, but it's just been on my mind. I just want to share it, because here at home, we also live in a time where retribution seems the name of the game in politics. States are just tripping over themselves to redistrict, to make sure that their party wins, not particularly caring about anyone but their base, not caring about what their citizens think, and they're just trying to fall into line to do what they've been told to do, or they lose their job. And we just saw that 6 out of 7 state senators in Indiana lost their jobs because they had the audacity to oppose redistricting, which they thought was wrong as a matter of principle. We just saw a United States senator come in third in a state primary because he had the audacity to argue that the president wasn't right on everything. There's a primary in Kentucky tonight, and actually the polls have just closed, and we will see if a opponent of the president's, someone who's had the audacity to speak up and criticize, gets to hold on to his seat, or whether the millions of dollars that were put in by the administration takes him out. Look, elected officials need to do their job. They need to vote their conscience. They need to represent the people who elected them, and they need to let the chips fall where they may. These jobs are not just that great. They're not that important. They're not monumental. It's not worth selling your soul and doing something you don't believe in just to keep your job. So my message to them is do what you know is right, because we know you know what's right. What you do is another thing, but we know you know. Don't bend to political pressure, because that is the easy thing to do, and that is what helps you keep your job. There is life. There is life after elective office, and at least you'll be able to leave with some sense of pride. So I hope you will. So listen, that's all the time we have today on Unconventional Times. I'm glad you joined us. Please tell your friends to subscribe. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts. And, you could watch us at YouTube at UT-Richard Gordon. YouTube at UT-Richard Gordon. So listen, thanks for joining us. Look forward to having you next time. Until then, remember, stay unconventional.
You've been listening to Unconventional Times with your host, Richard Gordon. Check out all of the episodes of Unconventional Times on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Richard Gordon and all of his unconventional conversations, head on over to unconventionaltimes.com. Thanks for listening.